All right, guys, so the first generation M1 MacBook Air is by far one of the best laptops on the market today. As a matter of fact, despite being a generation behind, I believe the M1 MacBook Air is the best laptop that money can buy for everyday productivity tasks and for light intensity performance tasks. The reason being is because Apple's M2 silicon lineup has found itself in a pretty peculiar situation because of its price point. When we saw Apple initially switch over to their proprietary silicon, we saw a massive leap in performance when compared to the Intel based models. However, I feel like we've kind of gone back to the more incremental updates that Apple is known for. The M2 MacBook series across the line sort of feels like M1S, so to speak. Similar to the way when the iPhone 4S came out, the only difference was really Siri when compared to the iPhone 4. So by opting for the M1, you could not only save money, but you could also take that money and put it towards storage or RAM if you wanted to and get a little bit more longevity out of the setup as well. So regardless, all in all, this is a very nice machine. So I originally bought the M1 MacBook Air for one purpose and one purpose only. And that's what I actually intended to use it for. It was to use an app that's only available on OS X that allows me to convert my ProRes RAW footage into Cinema DNG footage so that I could work with it in DaVinci Resolve on my workstation back there. However, I easily found this laptop becoming my daily driver for all of my productivity tasks that are not performance critical. So the one thing that has always attracted me to Apple products is their build quality. That is one thing that Apple is 100% known for, is just making products that feel premium. As a matter of fact, back in 2012 when I was in high school, the build quality of the MacBook Pro is what convinced me to go with the 2012 non-Retina version. Of course, Apple came out with the Retina version later that year, but even when I switched over to Windows, I found myself gravitating to the Razer Blade because it had a similar form factor and was all aluminum in its casing. Now, interestingly enough, I was never a fan of the MacBook Air series in general because of its wedge design. You can see how if we open up let me open it up here. If we open up the case, how it's a little bit thicker towards the back and thinner towards the front. I really like uniform bodies when it comes to that, but as I used the MacBook Air, it was something that I actually found really did not bother me overall. And the aluminum chassis of this laptop feels really good, especially when you are resting your palms on the chassis using the keyboard. The design of the laptop is not distracting at all. And that is what I feel is really important when it comes to premium products. It's a product that's made well and it functions well, not too much and not too little, just what you need in the actual form factor aspect. The keyboard on this laptop is also very nice too. When I've been writing my emails all day, I've never felt as if there was missed keystrokes, and I never felt like the keyboard prevented my accuracy or my speed while typing. So that is something else that you should keep in mind. Very nice keyboard when working with this machine. Now, the screen of the MacBook Air really isn't something particularly to write home about, but it's a very capable display. I really love the colors on this display. I also like the Rec 709 profile. And the contrast ratio of this display is also very nice. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that this is not an HDR capable display. The display tops out at around 500 nits, which is about 200 nits lower than the lower end of HDR and about 500 nits below the actual HDR standard, which is what we master HDR content at for the most part, for it to be considered decent HDR. And I want you guys to keep that in mind because out of the box, when you watch HDR content on Chrome, for example, on YouTube, it triggers the HDR function for the content instead of keeping it in standard dynamic range. And so I actually had to go in and change a setting in Chrome to prevent that from happening. So the display simply isn't capable of it. The content will look dark because it's not capable of hitting those high nit values. But overall, as we can see, this is a very bright display and a very usable display at that. Now, one thing that has continued to bother me about this laptop since I got it and could be a problem for you is the I/O, specifically the lack of ports. Now, I've managed to get away without having an HDMI port or a Thunderbolt port because of the fact that the laptop has AirPlay, which is perfectly fine for what I use the laptop for. However, what does bother me is the lack of USB ports. there's only two USB-C ports on the side of the laptop right here. And it's not the fact that they're USB-C ports that bothers me, it's really the fact that the laptop charges through USB-C, which is awesome, but it would be better if it had three ports, because when you're charging the laptop, you're now down to one effective port. This means when I was doing any of those conversions that I was going for, I ended up having to make sure the laptop was fully charged before I ended up starting those conversions, which would have been solved with three USB ports, and I refuse to be part of the dongle life. Now, with that being said, one of the things that kind of makes up for that is the longevity of the battery life of this laptop. With my everyday productivity tasks, from answering emails to moderate YouTube content consumption on my breaks, I average about 10 hours of battery life. Now, when I'm doing those conversions, I do find myself running on fumes after about an hour and 40 minutes of conversions. And I've only had the laptop die on me twice. So again, I could solve that problem with a dongle if I just ended up doing that was capable of charging the laptop. However, again, that MagSafe charger on the M2 MacBook Air is really nice, even though it only has two USB ports. And that's one of the things that I kind of would consider going for the M2 if I had to think about it, would be that MagSafe charger, so I had that expandability without the dongles. However, the good thing is, regardless of if the laptop is plugged in or not, you're going to get the same performance across the board with Apple's proprietary M silicon, which means the only time you'll ever get a performance decrease with these chips is if you hit a thermal limit. Now keep in mind, the M1 Air series and also the regular MacBooks, not the Pros, but the regular MacBooks are not air cooled. So under constant heavy loads, you will get thermal throttling. You're in a better shape if you do performance heavy tasks that come in bursts. That way the chassis can actually dissipate the heat for you. So that's going to be things like Adobe Lightroom work, Adobe Photoshop work, and Illustrator work. And with those programs, it's keeping it light. The Adobe Lightroom is pretty okay, but keep the Photoshop and Illustrator work light, because if it gets really heavy, you're gonna get some hiccups with the system and that thermal throttling. Also, if the files get bigger in those programs, you're gonna get some hiccups as well. That also goes for video editing. Personally, for me, I never recommend Apple products for video editing. I am a price to performance ratio kind of guy. I feel that Windows workstations today still offer better export times for less money, regardless of their power draw. My recommendation, especially to get the best bang out of the buck for the lower priced models, is to use Final Cut Pro X if you're gonna do any type of video editing, because of the optimization that Apple has. Now with that, if you're gonna use a program like DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro, I recommend sticking to a 1080p timeline and possibly even 1080p exports. At the end of the day, I feel like the M1 MacBook Air is the best product that Apple currently offers on their lineup for its value. Apple is known for inflated prices, and this is just a good machine. Maybe with the M3 and M4 series, Apple can change my mind on the video editing aspect. But until then, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I can't wait to bring you guys more tech content as I'm diversifying my channel. So be sure to give me a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications if you have not. My beautiful people, now more than ever, if you're ever feeling uninspired, uncreative, or just want to give up on life, remember, every day, airplanes take off against the wind. Keep climbing, stay inspired, and as always, stay fabulous. I'm Sydney. I'll see you beautiful people next time. Peace out.